Hey guys, AJ here, back with another college confessions story. So last time we wrapped up my first semester classes, at least the ones that I wanted to talk about. I took a few more classes, but they were pretty much uninteresting, or surprisingly well. Not interesting enough to tell a story about though. So we're going to be moving on to the second semester here. To do that, we need to talk about choosing classes. I mentioned it a little bit in my English class story, but talk about it a little more. When you get to college, most schools, as far as I'm aware, not just University X, your first semester, your classes are pretty much picked for you by some counselor somewhere. You might have input as, one or two electives that you'd like to take, but overall, they arrange your schedule. Fine, that's nothing wrong with that. So, second semester rolls around, it's on you to make your schedule. Okay, no problem, except for the fact that you get absolute last pick. Yes. See, when it comes to picking classes, what happens is they give you an hour. They give you an hour and a day. And on that hour, on that day, the website opens up, and you're allowed to pick your classes. However, for me, it was very, very, very late. It was pretty much the last slot. Because here's how it runs down. Honors kids and special needs kids get first pick. Okay? Seniors also get first pick. Then juniors get second pick, sophomores get third pick, and lastly, us freshmen, second semester, get last pick. Non-honors, non-special needs, just very last pick. And as far as what hour, I think Thursday and Friday were reserved for the freshmen. As far as what hour you got, I'm pretty sure it was completely random because I got dead slot. I knew kids that got, Thursday night. And this is important because classes fill up fast. As I mentioned, that one film class that I needed to take to open up all my other film classes, it's a prerequisite for every other one of the film classes, was filled up by the second day, which is ridiculous. Because it's my major. I should get some kind of special. I should hope that my major wasn't that big, so I'm pretty sure it was just a bunch of other kids taking it as an elective, whereas I really needed to take this class, and it would really help if I took it sooner than later. But no, of course, that's not considered in the system. The system is, I'm the bottom of the totem pole, so I get absolute last pick, and it doesn't matter that a ton of classes are filled up. This is why they encourage you to make 3 different schedules, because your classes are going to get filled up. So I make 3 different schedules, and as it turns out, the film class was filled up, Of course, the 3 other media classes I wanted to take were filled up. All the cool classes obviously were filled up. So I ended up picking Anthropology, which was a big mistake. The description said, and this is one of the problems, the course descriptions are very vague. It was just through the use of multimedia, such as film strips, readings, and blah blah blah, you will learn about, not film strips, actual videos on YouTube. You will learn about other cultures and stuff, and I'm like, that sounds cool, cool topic, whatever. I could use the 5 classes, because the way it worked out, you always want to do calculations on how many credits you should be taking per semester to graduate. I took a little bit more first semester because of my English class being worth more credits, and because of having to take a mandatory freshman class that was worth 1 credit. So I was a little bit over, so I could drop the class. And that's what I ended up doing, because, let me tell you, I went to this anthropology class. This professor was more accredited than any of the other professors I ever had at University X. She was super PhD lady, and even though it was an intro to anthropology class, first day she was talking about how you'd have to write a 15-page paper about what you studied when sitting out, in Central Park watching people. This is the big project. You sit there and you watch people, and then you write 15 pages about what you observed. She had a whole schedule of readings. You pretty much had to read about 40 pages of handouts, of dry handouts on human psychology and stuff like that, for every class. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. This is an elective. I don't need to take this class. Ridiculous. So I dropped that. And, moral of the story, try to learn as much as you can about the classes before you take them. Whatever, I dropped it with no penalty. I dropped it, after the first week. So anyway, so we get to algebra here, which is what I really want to talk about today. So when basically, they told me that I had to take one math class at my time at University X for my major. Didn't matter what math class. Any of them will do. Right? So, I get, the lowest level, the basic, what they recommend is Math for Life, which sounds really trivial to me, because I took discrete math senior year of high school, and let me tell you, it was the most basic infantile thing you could ever take. I mean, I got a great grade. I got an A+ in that class. Probably the only time I ever got an A+. But, I mean, you're not going to learn anything. The class was incredibly slow-paced. It was really annoying. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to take Math for Life. I qualified in my, qualifying tests, as I mentioned in my English class, story. I qualified, in the math portion, I qualified for Algebra. And I'm like, you know what? I could use some practice with simple multiplication and stuff. I could use some practice because I'm a little bit rusty. I was always of the mindset as a kid that, well, why do you need to learn any of this? Because you could just pull out a calculator at any time. That's true. That is entirely true. But being able to do multiplication, simple multiplication, and I mean, I'm not talking about super simple. I'm talking about, like 12 times 12, 144. Like, knowing how to do a little, slightly more advanced multiplication like that, as opposed to having to think about it, is faster than grabbing your calculator. It is. So, in short, you can use a calculator, but you're better off just knowing it really fast. It comes in handy. So I'm like, all right, I'll take this class. I took algebra in 6th grade. I got put in the advanced math class in middle school, right? So 6th grade, I took this algebra class. That is a long time ago. But I'm like, you know what? This is probably a college algebra course. Not probably. This is a college algebra course. I assumed that they would go a lot deeper than my middle school algebra class. I assumed, crazy assumptions to make, right? That, because there was no Algebra 1, Algebra 2, it was just Algebra. That was the name of the class, and the description wasn't very descriptive. I assumed that it would go into detail. I assumed that it would be at least somewhat intelligent, more intelligent than my middle school algebra class. It wasn't. The class moved at a slower pace than my middle school class. And it was frustrating as heck. Now the kids in this class, unlike all my other classes, they weren't mean, they weren't bad people, they weren't liars or cheaters or jerks. They were stupid though. And I shouldn't even say that because they weren't stupid. They didn't have the advantages that I had. They didn't have the education that I had. Let me just put it that way. A lot of these were inner city kids. Went to inner city schools that weren't that great. They weren't taking algebra. And if they weren't taking it with as good teachers apparently I had. Some of these kids were kids that served in the military right out of high school, and now they're coming back to college. And good for them. Really, that's great. I shouldn't call them stupid. But these kids had a lot of trouble grasping concepts that I instantly remembered from middle school. And therein lies the problem. If it was a refresher course, fine, but it was such a slow-moving class that it would literally be, he would introduce a concept, all right, a very basic concept, like foiling, first, outer two, inner two, last two, how to multiply, what are they called? I always have a problem with terminology because that's not really relevant in math, but multiplying two binomials, yeah, there we go. I think that's what I'm talking about here. But anyway, he'd introduce a concept like that, right? And you'd be like, okay, cool. I'd instantly remember it, and and he'd be like, okay, here's a few practice problems. And you practice, and then there'd be more practice problems, okay? And then there'd be 40 practice problems on the homework, and it'd be the same thing. And I didn't mind as much doing it because math. I prefer to do math work than like writing. All the writing I had to do last semester, I was kind of happy. But at the same time, it was like, okay, I get it. I totally, I got it the first time you said it. It's one of those things in math where practice helps, but once you kind of know a set of parameters, you should be good. In my case, once you know, what exponents are, once you know, 2 to the power of 2, that's 2 times 4. Once you know that, you're good. Unless there's a curveball. And here's one of the pains of the class, is that he would occasionally not tell us the curveballs. He would make us try and guess. And it's like, how am I supposed to know that 2 to the power of 0 ends up always being 1? Anything to the power of 0 except for 0 always ends up being 1. How on earth are you supposed to know that? You know, right? Until he tells it. But once he tells it, it's there. It's done. You know, you learned it. But this class, these kids wouldn't, they were very slow. They had a very hard time getting it. You know, you would tell them something, and some of them, I guarantee, you know, I will say some of them were slack-offs. I'm thinking of the Pokemon, but you know, a lot of them were, you know, genuinely good kids that just are having, you know, I guess even learning disabilities, you could say. But there were also some kids that were just not paying attention, you know, and there was, man, that one class, it was a very small classroom, a lot of kids, and some kids would come in reeking of smoke, and I literally couldn't move away from it, which was incredibly distracting. I remember my professor actually noticed. He was like, "Everything all right?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just, I'm allergic to chalk," you know, because he was using chalk. That's what I said. Really, the smoke was just like getting to my allergies. Like I was watering up and just not able to focus. You know, so there was a lot of issues with that class, and it was just very slow moving. And the professor, nice guy. He was the principal at some school in New York City for a long time. He was an older gentleman. You know, he was a sweet guy. Did a pretty good job of teaching. But what he would do, and this would just always grind my gears, he would talk down to the class. Not like intentionally. But he would do that thing that teachers do where, you know, he'd be like, "Can anyone tell me, you know, what's the next step?" And, you know, a kid would be like, "Oh, well, you add, you know, you drop down the 1 and then you divide them." And then he'd be like, oh, so you mean I can do this?" And, like, he would pretty much talk down, and it's not, he's not doing it to make us feel bad, but the way, you know, like, he's trying to be helpful and teach and you know, help the kid's self-esteem and stuff. But really, I mean, considering I already know all of this stuff, especially, but even if I didn't, it really makes me feel like I'm being talked down to. And I'm in a college here. Like, I'm a college-level student. You know, it's a little bit silly that's the way you choose to talk to us. You know, but I mean, it would just, anyone who's been in a math class, especially, or any class, I suppose, where you've already learned this stuff a different year, taking it again, you know, unless they go into it deeper, which they definitely didn't. There was nothing in this class that I didn't learn in middle school. It's frustrating because you know everything. You know, so we'd ask a question, and I'd know it instantly, but I didn't want to raise my hand because I could literally answer every question. And, you know, then I'd be a show-off, you know, the other kids wouldn't learn, and I wouldn't feel smart for knowing the answer because it's just, to me, it's, you know, common sense, because it's something that's been in the back of my brain for years. And it would pretty much be, as soon as he would mention, like, you know, X formula or whatever, it would instantly come back to me. I wouldn't remember it, like, you know, 5 minutes before, but as soon as he would start talking about a math concept, you know, the stuff that's been buried in the back of my brain would instantly come to the forefront. And that was cool. I'm so glad that I did get that refresher, but at the same time, you know, that would be the first 5 minutes of class, and I'd be like, cool, I'm remembering this, and then it would be another hour and a half of just, let's do the same problems over and over again. They use the same rules, so nothing's really going to change about them, you know? Rarely are there curveballs. So we're just going to keep practicing the same thing. And, you know, he was a stickler for having your cell phone out, so I couldn't have my phone out. You know, I couldn't be doing anything else, because what would happen is he'd give a sample problem, I'd do the problem, you know, lickety-split, and then it'd be like 10 minutes later before the rest of the class was done. So, where's the problem? Like, the main problem here was that the class wasn't descriptive enough, and that, honestly, I was very overqualified for the class. Which was just irritating. But, you know, I got through it. I got a good grade. But it was just a very frustrating experience for anyone who's ever done that. It's the weirdest thing. You would think that, you know, you just go in with the mentality of, oh, easy A, I know this stuff, you know, I only have to give half an effort, so it'll be fun and easy. But really, it just becomes frustrating when someone tries to teach you something that you already know. But I suppose it's also partially my fault for not switching out of the class. But considering I already dropped my anthropology class, you know, I was afraid to move because if I were to move up to like a math class that was, you know, maybe beyond me, I don't know. I had a lot of problems with pre-calc in high school. You know, if they put me into calculus, I would be in big trouble and I wouldn't be able to drop it. You know. So yeah, I mean that's that. Don't take a class that you think you already know all this stuff for, unless it's going to be at least a little bit more advanced. And I guess just be careful with reading things. Your best bet is to know people who've taken these classes, talk to them. I mean, even go and talk to the professors, talk to your guidance counselors and stuff. But, yeah. So that's about it for this time. Next time we will get to the last class that I want to talk about, which will be my Italian class. So, see you guys next time. Hey guys, don't forget to subscribe if you liked me, like this video if you, well, like this video, and comment if you have an opinion on anything that I just said. Oh, and I also have a Twitter. Follow me at Pieguyrulz. I usually respond to any comments or questions that I get. Pieguyrulz,